Northern Ireland, it's impossible for people to understand this now, but it literally used to dominate the news headlines. I mean, virtually every other morning there would be acts of terrorism, there would be people killed, there'd be assassinations, and Northern Ireland itself was just completely riven by this conflict. And therefore, when I first started to look at how we would resurrect the peace process begun under John Major and then make it work, I mean, most people said to me, quite frankly, this is hopeless and you shouldn't try it because you'll invest all this political capital and you'll just spend it and lose it. But I thought it was partly because we were approaching a new millennium, partly because within Europe, the Irish government, the British government had good relations, and partly for all sorts of personal reasons to do with my own family background in Northern Ireland. I just decided I wanted to try and thought it was worth trying. So when we turned up in Belfast that April, the thing was in a state of collapse. So I didn't think we would get an agreement. And throughout the course of the next days as we negotiated, through the day and then through the night, or most of the night, it would be, sometimes it would be on and sometimes it would be off. Shortly before it was announced, it was off, and then we put it back on again. But it was an extraordinary roller coaster. And as we stayed there in this not very convenient building, frankly, with all these people crammed in it, trying to negotiate in different rooms and in different scenarios, the media were outside, the pressure was building, and in a funny way that helped, because people thought, look, this really is an historic moment, so you make it work or you don't, and now's the time to do it. I was never under any illusion that the signing of the agreement wasn't going to conclude the conflict. It gave us a chance to conclude it. It opened up a framework within which you could resolve the conflict, but it wasn't resolved simply by doing the agreement. And there were a whole series of changes and reforms that were going to take place over the next years. And so it proved. I mean, it was literally virtually a decade of more ups and downs, more negotiations, until we finally got the government in Northern Ireland established with Martin McGuinness and Ian Paisley sitting down together, something no one ever believed would happen. So today, it's still very fraught, but I think there is a depth to the process. There are roots that have been put down that I don't think anyone on the island of Ireland really wants to disturb. I mean, there will be sectarian groups, and you've always got to watch it, and you've got to manage it all the time. But I think people realize to go back to the past would be a complete disaster. Because when you get two communities that distrust each other over a long period of time, and you could argue this conflict goes back hundreds of years, not decades, it's not surprising. But I think in time, time will resolve this. And we're 25 years on from the Good Friday Agreement. Seems like a long time, but in some ways it's a relatively short time. So I think this, if the peace is allowed to continue to bear fruit, I think this will in the end resolve itself, because some of these old disputes which revolve around Catholic, Protestant, nationalists, unionists, in a way, in a modern world, they should be able to be resolved reasonably peacefully, but also with the knowledge that what you can do together is so much more than if you divide on sectarian lines. I was engaged really for the whole of my premiership, that's 10 years in this process, and I learned two things. The first is nothing's ever irresolvable. It may seem to be irresolvable, but it can be resolved ultimately. And secondly, that it's not a good idea to speculate on whether it's been resolved until you actually have a resolution, because the one thing's for sure is that if things are leaked out, or you disclose things before you're ready to move forward, then what happens is you lose the thing altogether. So I hope they can find an agreement. They should try and find an agreement. It's essential for people in Northern Ireland. We know what the problem is. arising out of Brexit, but let's hope it can be resolved.